It's mise on Seanchaidh, and this is Thistle and Stone. The sound of Carrera never slept. It throws itself against Dunollie like a blade that refuses to break. And in the roar, the old ones still hear the same cry that has haunted Lorn for 900 years. Buoy no bash, buoy no bash. There, where the Atlantic meets the black cliffs and the gulls scream like banshees, the MacDougalls stood. Sons of the dark stranger, keepers of the western gate, last true lords of Lorn's shadow. This is their school. Is mise on Seanchaidh, and this is Thistle and Stone. Long ago, a raven flew out of the western gale and landed on the prow of the first MacDougalls galley. With the voice of Somerled it spoke. You are my true heir in Lorn. You will hold these shores with the black galley and the raven's eye. You will never bow to any crown, but the tide will remember your name. When the last raven leaves Dunollie, the last MacDougal will fall with him. The sea took the oath that night. Every MacDougal born since has carried that shadow. Proud as the raven, cold as the Atlantic, lethal when roused. Listen, the sea is still listening. Cuimhnich. From that raven-blessed vow came Clan Guhul, children of the dark stranger, oldest blood of Somerled, once lords of Argyll, before Argyll became Campbell. Dunollie rose on its rock like a black fist against the sky, not to keep enemies out, but to keep the old blood in. Every chief who took the name carried the raven's promise in his veins. No crown would ever own Lorn while a MacDougal heart still beat. The burn ran red when the heather bloomed, and the pipes answered every sunset from caves no lowlander ever found. For centuries they ruled by the old laws. On the shores of Loch Linnhe, Gaelic judges spoke the old laws through salt wind and Atlantic rain, long before Edinburgh's writ reached the western sea. Seanchaidh sang the night full of heroes until the gulls themselves fell silent to listen. The women of Lorn buried sons to the tide and still stood watching the western horizon, their grief colder than the January sea. Their black galleys, long swords gleaming, sailed with the lords of the isles, and when the dream cracked, they sailed on alone, answering only to the wind and the wave. Yet blood calls to blood, and pride answers pride. MacDougalls and the Bruce tore each other across Strathfillan. At Dalree in 1306, John of Lorn tore the Brooch of Lorn from Robert Bruce's cloak with his own hand. The brooch is still in Dunollie, and the blood of Bruce still stains the clasp. While swords rang in the pass of Brander, the deeper war was fought with ink and forfeiture. Every charter carried a Campbell flourish and a MacDougal wound. And while the long swords rang, the crown in Edinburgh smiled quietly and waited for the West to bleed itself weak. When the Jacobite star rose, Lorn answered. In 1715, Ian Ciar MacDougal of Dunollie led his men to victory at Sheriffmuir. His brother stood beside him, and the galley banner waved high. 30 years later, the 23rd chief, Alexander MacDougal, was preparing to rise for bonny Prince Charlie. To stop him from going, his wife, Mary Campbell of Culloden, poured a kettle of boiling hot water over his feet, preventing him from travelling to battle. His brother Duncan led his kinsmen in the front line at Culloden, fighting with the Atholl men on the right wing. They charged when the order came, broke through the first government rank in fierce hand-to-hand combat, and fell where they stood. The moor drank deeper than it ever had before. The raven screamed that night off Carrera, and the tide ran black with grief. Then came the sheep and the silence. The same Campbells who had taken their lands now counted the living for eviction. Glens that had roared with pipes and children fell quiet. The coffin ships left from Oban, heavy with MacDougalls, bound for the rocky farms of Cape Breton and the long winters of Nova Scotia. They stood on the decks, with Dunollie at their backs and the tears on their faces, and the fire did not sail with them. It stayed behind, watching over a coast growing emptier by the year, and the silence never truly lifted. Today Dunollie is traded in wedding vows and gift shop trinkets, while the last croft in Glen Lonan that once rang with 3 generations of MacDougal forging songs is now a luxury bothy, where strangers are told the gales left gladly, as though the silence came by choice. The old burial ground at Kilbride is fenced off for a housing development whose signs promise exclusive coastal living in English only. The Victory still tastes of ash, only quieter now and colder. Yet the raven still flies above Dunollie. The tide still crashes against its rock like it has for 900 years. The MacDougalls are scattered from Lorn to Cape Breton, from Glasgow to Sydney. But every one of them knows the road home ends where the raven first landed on the prow. You will still hear their pipes on a winter's night above Oban. You will still meet a MacDougal in Maboo who can recite 20 generations without a stumble. You will still find a child on the shore of Loch Nell who dreams of the galley and wakes with salt on her lips, though the last black burlin rotted 300 years ago. Because the oath is not broken. Because the raven is still watching. Because the sea is still listening. Dunollie's stones remember the stripping. The sound keeps its secrets. The raven is still circling somewhere beyond the western waves. The promise made to the dark stranger is calling again. Not for crowns, not for vengeance, but for the coast itself, for the language, for the children who should be born to the sound of Atlantic breakers speaking the old tongue. MacDougalls of Lorn, of Cape Breton, of Oban, of Inverness, of the far ends of the earth. wherever the Campbells and the factors scattered you. The peat fire is down to embers. The tide is turning. Will you answer? Bui no bash. Bui no bash. Cuimhnich brastial a thurna, agus onirch a yalv. Remember the Brooch of Lorn, and the raven that flew, and come home. It's me Seanchaidh, and this is Thistle and Stone. Cuimhnich. 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 Falche. Gu. Cuimhnich. The memory lives. Until next time. Cuimhnich.